Welcome back for another book review. Today we are talking about this one. So I'm not going to be super energetic if you can hear it in my voice. Once again, I am sick. I was better for like 2 days, and then we all got sick again. So here we are, back at square one. I was sick like all of March, apparently all of April too now. So anyways, let's talk about this book. So I had bought this years ago, and I was hoping that it would be better. And I remember the first time I had tried to get through it, I didn't really like it, and I felt like maybe this time I can appreciate it more. I've kind of honed in on like what I like and what I don't in books, and still no. So this book, Who Were the Celts? It's a little misleading of a title. And honestly, other people have complained about this as well, and it just doesn't seem like the author is very well at organizing his thoughts for this book. Now obviously this is not a witchy book, this is more of a historical book, but when you go through the craft, eventually you need to start studying some history. Whether you study the history of witchcraft, and you go like the very historical route, and go through like the witch trials and stuff like that, and how our ancestors did it is usually the way we go. And if you have a pantheon you like, typically you will study about that particular culture back in the day, before Christianity took over. That said, that's what I was hoping for with this book, and it really isn't. This book, we're gonna divide it into like 3-ish sections. The first section, which is probably about like half-ish of the book, is about the Roman Empire. And it felt really weird to, who are the Celts? The Romans. The entire time. Like, it was all about Roman battles. There's little bits here and there about the Celts, but it really felt like it was the Romans. And if you had told me the first half was about the Roman Empire, it would make more sense, because that's all it was talking about. And there's a few things early in the book that immediately were red flags. For example, I think it was in the first like 20 pages, the author had said something about the timeline, and he used the Christian terms, where modern day we don't usually, especially if you're presenting a historical text and you're trying to talk about history in like an academic sense. It isn't usual to find people saying, before the birth of Christ. Normally we don't say that. Now it's before Common Era. And before Christ. There's a lot of Christian stuff in this book, and that immediately gave a slant to the writing. And once you start to notice it, it's really apparent. He is very Christian, and you can tell that history is swaying in his favor. And so that was already a red flag. And again, kind of early in the book, he bounces around in the timeline constantly, which gets really obnoxious. But I think it was like page 68. He was like, just the tone of how he was describing things. So he was talking about the Druids, and then he talked about the, like, basically the wannabe Druids of modern times, and like Druids, and always putting it in quotes. And it's like, dude, you're calling yourself a Christian. Like, I'm pretty sure ancient Christian and modern Christian are quite different too. Why are you putting in quotations? Like, stop. And he also refused to capitalize paganism, but would capitalize Christianity. So it's like little stuff like that that's just like slights at other people. And he very much was against, without saying he was against, modern paganism, in how he was describing like how modern pagans and modern Druids, which he said it was always the Druids, and I'm like, other pagans go too? To like Stonehenge. And it was just like little stuff like that very early on. It made me distrust the author, and it got worse. So again, the first half, all about Rome, really, and the battles, really, that was it. There was so little on the life and day-to-day, and like, I know it's ancient history, and the majority of history is just going to be battles, because that's what was written down, because that's what dudes cared about. But for a historical book on who were the Celts, that's a very small detail. I want to know what their clothing was made out of. What kind of styles did they do? Like, did they have, like, what kind of style of braiding did they do to their hair? What was their meals like? You know, what was the day-to-day of people existing like? Not battles with Rome. It just seemed really strange. And other people noted on that too. So then, once we get through Rome, And the only other thing that I should mention was that the only mention, really, of any deities, other than in, like, very quick, like, one-sentence passages here and there, maybe, because, like, he spelled certain names, and I questioned why he was spelling them certain ways, but the only one that he even, like, vaguely talked about was comparing the Morrigan to a Roman goddess of the sewers. And he's like, well, you can obviously tell what type of society they preferred. And I'm like, dude, do you realize, like, how vital a proper sewage system is, though? Because y'all are not taking it as seriously as you need to. That can get really dangerous really fast. There are so many diseases if the sewage is not taken care of. Like, the people who manage that in our, like, modern world really need to earn as much money as possible. Because, like, if that doesn't work, it goes bad really fast. Have you ever had to live without running water for, like, a week? And you need to go to the bathroom? It gets nasty fast. So, like, yeah, I would definitely put a sewer goddess right on the same pedestal as the Morrigan, who's in charge of battles. Which, granted, he did not leave the nuance of how she's in charge of other things, but whatever. And then he always, like, he has this thing that paganism, especially ancient paganism, all circulated back to the Great Mother. And I'm like, that's not true. If you look at how much of the pagan world was, there was no the Great Mother in any of the cultures. Really, most of them, all of the gods had their roles. There wasn't, like, the upper one. That was more of a Christian concept, where you have, like, the top dude kind of a thing. Most of the time, they all had their own things they were doing, like a society. And so that also got old, because it's like, okay, you obviously have a bias here. So then, we'll come to the next section of this book, which is, like, it's past the halfway point, but not quite to the end. And he takes this really weird, like, just side tangent. You know that meme where it's, like, the sports car's, like, going down the freeway, and they're like, oh, we're gonna take this exit. That meme everyone has seen? That's what this felt like, but specifically because we're talking about the Celts. Now, I'm not, obviously, from there, if you couldn't guess by my accent. I'm not from the Celtic regions, but I'm pretty sure it's more than Ireland, if I had to take a wild guess. And he gets really biased, and he has this, like, pro-Ireland thing, and I'm like, I don't have a dog to fight in this battle, but, like, why are we so focused on Ireland? Like, isn't it all of kind of the UK-ish, like, that general region of the world, really? And it was all Ireland. Irish could do no wrong. They were just the victims over and over and over, and those horrible British. And then it was the Vikings, and the way he described them was like, I feel like I need to fact check you a little bit, because he's describing it more like, to me it came off as the Vikings were like a people and it's a job. They were not the Vikings, it was a job title to be a Viking. They're more of the Norse people. So that was the thing. And there is also, like, Jackson Crawford has talked about this. He's way more the, like, historical expert. And he talked about how, like, the Vikings had, obviously they did, like, pillage and plunder what they did, but they also would go for trade, and they would also settle in other places, and they weren't always the enemy, and so, like, there was no nuance for that either. They were just always the bad guys. The British were the bad guys. The poor Irish, they were just the victims of everybody. And then he talks about how the conversion of, again, because he's, like, specific on Ireland right now, the conversion was just this gentle passage from paganism into Christianity. And I'm like, listen, if you convince the king of wherever that he's going to be Christian, that doesn't count as no bloodshed because you got the king to convert. He's going to enforce it with bloodshed. Like, it just, to say that it was just, like, this gentle passage is like, bro, what are you talking about? Like, it was giving off, like, the Christians are the good guys vibes, and it's like, no, actually. And there's plenty of examples in other parts of world history where that kind of situation, like, all I could think about was, like, the American history that we've learned, and it's like, this feels really reminiscent, like, it brings up a lot of memories of how the settlers weren't the problem over here, and that we were really just chummy with the natives here, and it like gave the same vibes of like, we're just converting them. Just like screw paganism, it's fine. And obviously the Native American thing and the Irish is a little different, obviously, but it's still an erasing of a culture because the Christians did not want to have any, and it really was the Christians over here too. Christianity did not want other to exist. It was their way or you were dead. I mean, just look at a history book. And so, like, from that point onwards, suddenly, it's just Christian history. That's it. That's all this book became. Different saints and sacred dudes and just Christian figures the rest of the way. And it's like, why do I care? And then the last little part of the book, I want to say it was like the last chapter or so, it was just like off the wall. It felt like the author had completely lost whatever outline he kind of vaguely had, because we were just bouncing around in time to random dudes. Like, at one point we're talking about some saint guy in like 1830, then we're talking about President Bush, then we're back to like 1856, then we're at 1913, then we're at 1812, then we're over here at, like, it was just all over the place. And it had no rhyme or reason, and I'm like, why are we talking about this? What is the purpose? This, like, when we're asking, like, who are the, I mean, I get it. He says up to the present, and, like, I guess. But it felt really weird to be like, ah, yes, President Bush. He had, like, Irish ancestry, and I'm like, that feels like you're stretching to hit a word count. What are you talking about? I would love to hear about modern Ireland. I don't live there. Why not mention that? But no, we're just talking about like random. And it just, by the end of the book, it was like, this felt so discombobulated. There was nothing that really tied a story together. You would think going through history is pretty linear. It'd be pretty easy to like just go down a pathway, but it always just felt really random. And even the battles didn't really go in order. It just was so weird. A lot of stuff was repeated. A lot of people didn't like this book, and I'm in that category. And so at this point, I'm getting to a like place in my reading where I'm getting rid of books that I don't like. This is going away along with the one I talked about on Patreon exclusively because I didn't feel like it was appropriate to post a book where I DNF'd it. I did not finish it, so I made it just a Patreon exclusive for The Mystery of Crystal Skulls. That one exists over there, but these two are immediately getting out of the house. Just know, I've had this book for years. I didn't like it when I first read it. Rereading it, I still don't like it. And like the author has like a definite like ego trip when you read through it. And it's like, Who Were the Celts is a fast-paced adventure and sheer pleasure to read. And I'm like, this was anything but fast-paced. This was one of the slowest reads I have gone through in a while. And it took me multiple days to get through this book because it took so long. It was so boring. So anyways, that is my thoughts on this book. Obviously, I didn't really love this book. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one in the comments down below. Huge thank you to my patrons. I'll have their names here on the screen. If you'd like to support me and get access to exclusive content, it is patreon.com/nightwillowcrafts. Make sure to like and subscribe. I post every single day, and until next time, thank you so much for watching, and blessed be.